BWI Daily Edition back again today with Nate Bauer. We're continuing our series on confidence factor. We've given you all of the information, the analysis, the breakdown of training camp. We're rolling it all into one number and giving you that number. I came out with my confidence factor for each position group yesterday. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr, the BWI Daily Edition. Senior editor Nate Bauer back with me, one of our insiders. Nate, how you doing today? You feeling confident?
Boy, there's two questions there, and there's two answers. Yeah, good and sure. Why not?
Well, that is perfect. That's what I like to hear, because we're talking about how confident we are in the Penn State football team with individual positions. And again, if you want to check out the BWI Daily Edition, wherever you get your podcasts, you can hear yesterday's version. If you listen to that, I did do the cardinal sin is you promise something and then you don't deliver on it. We're going to have a big mega show with all of our football insiders today and giving everyone's confidence factor. But Greg Pickle got hung up with a couple other assignments today, so it's just me and Nate, and we're going to go through. I know, and
Greg.
That's not to undersell you. That's what you don't do, guys. But anyway, I think we still got a great show coming up today with Nate. So let's get right into it, and we'll start with the place we started yesterday, the confidence factor in the quarterback position with Sean Clifford and the quarterback room. Nate, how confident are you in that position?
We talked about this. This isn't going to be a 2-hour show. So I don't know how we can even possibly include the quarterback position in this discussion and keep it under that. Now, my number, I'm looking at your number. You have 63. I have 74. And 74 suggests, based on your grading scale that you laid out yesterday, that suggests a pretty good performance, right? Like, this isn't A, B, C, D, right? It's like 60 and below, you're failing. This is 80 is all Big Ten, right?
Yes, for sure, right? All Big Ten performance. Anything above that, you're getting national All-American consideration, yeah.
Yeah, so I do not think that Sean Clifford is an All-American, and I don't think he will play quite well enough to go all Big Ten, but I think he'll be just shy of it. I don't think that he will be at the bottom of the Big Ten. And the reason for that is fairly simple. I'm not this isn't any like grand insight here, but I just think the pieces around him will be that much better, that much more consistent. Has the talent shifted so markedly that, right, like that it lifts it? Like, is there a Saquon Barkley on the team now that there wasn't last year? No, I don't think so. Is Noah Cain's return that important? Honestly, probably not. Like, the talent in the running back room is good enough. But a year of seasoning for the offensive line should largely, which is back, should do wonders for Sean Clifford. If you look at how many problems he had last year based on pressure in the pocket, right, which was significant. That was a huge problem. His problem being on the same page as his receivers last year, who he had really virtually no experience with going into the season, right? I mean, even Jahan Dotson was something of an unknown.
Right.
All of those different elements are just in a much better place for Penn State this season. And so naturally, I think it's fair to expect him to at least return to 2019 levels, which were not off the charts great, but they were good enough.
Right.
Right? Like,
they were good enough to be a winning football team that was in every game that he played in, right?
Correct.
Right.
And so, and then there's some debate to be had about, certainly his performance at Minnesota, of which I think that the numbers outside of the interception, right? Like,
right.
And there's no world where that doesn't matter, right? Like, you can't, like, even me, the words coming out of my mouth, I'm like, oh, I shouldn't be saying this. If you look at the numbers without the interceptions, the interceptions are the numbers.
Right, but to your point, and this is, I think, an important thing, because we are going back to 2019 for this analysis, because last year was such an aberration that to find stable things to look at Sean Clifford with. You really have to go to what was a stable environment. And in that game, if you want to talk about the numbers and some of the deeper analysis, PFF put half of those interceptions on the receivers. Like those were not all his fault. That was actually one of his highest graded, I believe it was his highest graded game of the season against Minnesota. And that was right before he got an injury. And then the rest of the season played out the way it did. So even in 2019, there's a bit of a muddled picture. I went with that, in the 60s as an idea of he's going to be a part of this offense, and the offense as a whole is good. What you're saying is in my opinion, what you're saying is that he's going to be better than 2019. Do you believe that's the case?
Yes. No, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Okay.
I mean, look, like experience often brings success or consistency, right? Like more than
Right.
anything, it's just the older that these guys get, like it's just it's such a difference between 18 years old and in his case 23,
Yeah.
right? Like I mean, and I'm not obviously he wasn't 23 or he wasn't 18 a couple of years ago, but it's just a big difference to have that time, and he's been through all of this. He's done it. He has been through it. It's not to say that he won't still have some of the issues with being too amped up at the beginning of the game or rattled or what have you. I mean, I think that all of those elements are things that I'm going to be watching. I'm sure everybody else is going to be watching because we have preconceptions about Sean Clifford now.
Right.
We are going into this season with things that we think might happen with him, and you're just not sure. It could be all over the map. You're just not sure exactly how he's going to look. But history suggests that he has an opportunity, given the improvements around him, to be the guy who overwhelmingly is managing the game for you, right? And I mean, again, I'm using a cliche because like I hate that, just managing a game. He makes plays too, but there's a huge, massive difference between him feeling like he has to make a play every play for them to have success offensively versus letting just about everyone else do just about all of the heavy lifting and then picking and choosing your spots, right?
Right.
And making the plays when those are a necessity. And I mean, like I'm not gonna you know raise the ghost of Trace McSorley here, but Trace McSorley's best performances were like that,
Yeah.
right? When the other
Sure.
when and that's the deal is if he's put in a position in an environment where that success can happen outside of his own doing, I think that he's capable of that, and I think that he's shown that. I mean, I do think that that's on film. You can see that he is capable of doing that.
So, speaking of those other guys on the field, let's go to the skill positions. We'll go through them one by one when it comes to running backs, tight ends, and receivers. We'll start in the backfield. You mentioned Noah Cain already. How confident are you in the running back room?
Yeah, so you had an 88, which is definitely all Big Ten. I got 83, which also all Big Ten.
Yeah.
I think it's Noah Cain, but I think that if it's not, it might be somebody else.
Yeah,
Like
that
I
was
think,
my reasoning, is that my confidence in this group is high because I think somebody can get injured and they're still going to have an all Big Ten capable running back because they have such a deep group this year. Yeah, that's absolutely
exactly,
right.
exactly, and I mean, I hesitate to go too like to stray from the reality here, right? Like if Noah Cain is the top running back, then Penn State's coaches have already seen that. Like it's not like he's waltzing back into a job that he earned 2 years ago, and so they're just handing it back to him after missing a year, right? Like they're not gonna do that, and he doesn't have that much. And this is partly why I have a lower score for this group is our recollection collectively of Noah Cain is from a game that happened 18 plus months ago in the Cotton Bowl, right? Right, like that one off and at Iowa,
Right.
into that, right? Like,
The end of the Pitt game, these are all flashes and not necessarily a full season of Noah Kane. Sure.
he has never been a feature back in Penn State's offense. That is the reality for Noah Kane. And so, what's the difference, right? Like, how is it going to work if he's a guy who's getting 20, 22 carries a game? And I don't know that that's the case this year. Like, I don't know that that's what's going to happen. But I do think that there is some projecting going on of, yeah, well, we think that we've seen this from Noah Kane before, but we haven't really seen it recently,
Right.
and through no fault of his own. But that's just putting that out there. Is I think that I have a few more questions or a little more uncertainty about what he's going to be in that realm. But to your point, yeah, if it's not him, if for whatever reason it's not him, uh, pretty good options,
Yeah.
pretty good options in the rest of that room.
Yeah.
And so when the gap between the top and literally the fourth, fifth running back is not that big, uh, that bodes well for the positional success that you're about to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Do they have anyone that if so I think you're a little less confident than I was in just the general production of the room, but one of the reasons I held short of giving them a higher grade than I did was I don't know there's a guy that can be and can produce at that level given the skill sets of the guys that we've talked about as the lead backs in this group. Do you see anybody that can get to that level? Or is that why you land where you do with that 80? Was it 83 overall in your confidence grade? Is it that, or is it simply your confidence in not knowing what Noah Kane is specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's mostly Noah Kane in the sense that I think Noah Kane might be an All-American,
Okay.
right? Like, I mean, he might be, but also he might not be,
Right.
right? Like, I mean, uh, you know, I do think I just have more questions about exactly who he is going to be. That doesn't mean that Lee and Holmes, John Lovett and Devin Ford, that one of those guys can't pop in and bolster the success of the room so much that you've got a one and a two who do create a ton of production. I think that that's possible. I think that that's very possible. It's just I'm not exactly sure what the ceiling is for Noah, and I'm not sure what the floor is for Noah. Like I
Right.
don't know what that looks like from him. I mean, I just feel a little less certain about what exactly Noah Kane's going to be this year because so much of the conversation about him is about potential. It's not about what he's actually done. It's
Yeah.
about, oh, okay, well, these are the flashes of what he's done. I just haven't seen it on a consistent basis.
Speaking of that, I think you can say that about all of the running backs in the room, even John Lovett, who the reason he transferred is because he was not given that lead back opportunity at Baylor, how he ended up at Penn State. One guy that I think we do absolutely know what he brings to the table, that would be Jahan Dotson at the receiver position. But your grade, I think, is similar to mine. Is your thinking similar to mine when we get to the receiver position? What's your confidence in this group and why?
Yeah, no, I mean, so you had 78, I have 75. I'm so, and I'll put it out there, like, yeah, I looked at your grades first just to get a gauge of where you had them, and
This was
so
my idea, so I don't blame you.
yeah, yeah, no, no. I mean, the only point is to differentiate slightly, like
Hmm.
so if you are 78 confident, I'm 75. Like I'm almost there. I'm
Yeah.
just not quite as confident based on what I know of your perception is of the receivers. Do I think that Jahan Dotson is really good? Yes, absolutely. He's proven it. It's done. Fine.
Yeah.
Um, great great piece to start with. However, I just again Parker Washington is interesting to me because so much of his production last year came in 2 or 3 games.
Right.
Um,
Yep.
right? Uh, can he be a 4 or 5 catch a game kind of guy? I I don't know. I think maybe.
Hmm.
You
Somebody
know, it's
asked me
just
a
a
really interesting question, and I hadn't considered it before because the way that he was used last year, 98% of his snaps came in the slot. But new offensive coordinator, can he? I know we talked about this last week. Can he play on the boundary? Can he be a guy that also, even if it's not full time, plays outside and kind of molds into what you're talking about right now of a 4 to 5 catch a guy, depending on how you align him.
I mean, they want these guys to be lined up or to be able to line up at every position in the receiving core, right? I mean,
Hmm.
that's the goal, is to move these guys around, because I think that some of what they felt last year was that the um, the fact that they were stagnant, right? Like 98%. If you're a defensive coordinator, you know where that guy's going to be
Yep.
all the time,
Yep.
and you knew where Jahan Dotson was going to be all the time, and so you that gives you the ability to defend differently than if they're moving around and shifting on the field. And so, I mean, I think that, and you've discussed this at length, like the pre-snap motion, the right, like Mike Yursich and the way that this offense runs. I think the intent is to have these guys moving spots and moving pre-snap and delivering the ball to a variety of players. I mean, I just don't. I don't think it's the first read and you go to it,
Yeah.
um, right?
Yeah.
So, so yeah. I don't know. I mean, you know, Ken Parker Washington. Like, you tell me, Ken Parker. Like, does he have the size to be able to do that, or is
the
he?
the only thing that I don't know, and this is where it changed. One of the things that changed last season is early on they were using him as a deep threat on play action passes, and that offense didn't work. So I think he's fast enough. He's definitely big enough. By the way, my nickname for him, I've decided, is Small Quan because he has the biggest quads and calves I've seen on a small guy since Saquon. Like, he's just a smaller version of what Saquon looked like from the hips down. So yes, I think he's thick enough. I think he's strong enough to play on the outside. You don't have to be 6'2" to play on the outside. You just have to have the skills necessary to get open and contested catches and all those things. He has all the building blocks. The one thing I just don't know, because I haven't seen his 40 time, is how exactly fast is he? Outside of
Yeah.
that, yes, I think he can play and win on the outside. He doesn't have to be just a slot player. So yeah, that's my confidence in my number came from the fact that I'm very high on him and Jahan Dotson, but I have no confidence in anybody else. And I'm
Yeah.
leaning on what you said of you lead with your top two and you're usually fine after that.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's true, and I think that that's probably we're pretty close on this one. I mean, maybe I'm a tick less confident in Parker Washington, but yeah, if you need a solid two to start from, those are pretty solid. That's a pretty good place to start. But I do think that they need a third.
Yes.
Just as a complementary piece, right? Like, so much. It's the way that James Franklin talks about explosive plays, and right, like, so so much of the game and outcome of the game can be dictated by home runs,
Yes.
right? Like,
Yep.
so much of it, and so it doesn't take a lot. You don't have to. Cam Sullivan Brown, Keandre Lambert Smith, whoever it is, they don't have to necessarily have 50 catches to be a very, very productive receiver in Penn State's offense and to help this team win. They just need to be a threat and create enough respect
Right.
from defenses that it opens the door for yes, for themselves to be that 1 or 2 catches and make those catches count, but also to continue to at least command and demand the attention uh, of defenses. And so, I do think that that's important. I think that them having some home runs, some big plays, some big scoring plays matters to this offense. But you know, who knows? I have no idea. I don't think you have any idea. I don't know that they have any idea.
So
realistically.
this is a perfect segue to get into the next position, because can some of that threat, whether from the interior, from inline, or even flexed out wide, can some of that threat come from the tight end position? So we'll move on to your confidence factor in what the tight ends are. Where do you land on that scale?
Yeah, I mean, I think very good. I think they're very good. I don't know that, and again, like this seems to be something of a trend that you're seeing this season in particular is the development of the program in that the again the top and the bot like you have depth that is ready to play, and the gap between the top and the bottom of the depth chart is not that big. And so uh, is there a Mike Gesicki in this tight end room? I don't think so. I don't
Yeah,
think that they right. Is there a Pat Fryermuth? I
right.
don't I don't necessarily think so. Uh, but there might be some third round NFL draft choices, right?
Yeah,
Like and
yeah.
and maybe three of them, maybe three third round guys,
So that
right? Like
really,
that's
that's the thing, is they're all unproven. And as much as I love Brenton Strange, and this is, the comparative thing is what I'm saying here, not necessarily the level of play, but he's got a George Kittle like ability where he's a really great athlete, he's really quick. If he can learn to break tackles, he can be a threat underneath. But we've seen zero of that. Like, that's just
yeah,
his ability. That's my opinion of his physical ability. We have
yeah,
no idea where on that scale he's going to land. He could just be an undersized tight end that you always have the potential and you think is always there, but we don't really know. And that's why I came in a little bit lower than you, is because as much as I love the physical potential of this group, I have less confidence in them than I do Parker Washington, that I saw him do it last year. I saw the flashes of it at a more consistent level. But you think that one of these guys is going to play at a high level, whether it's one or multiple. And I guess that's the question. Is it one or is it multiple to you, and why you got into the 80s with your confidence in this group?
yeah. I mean, I think that it almost goes back to the running back thing. First of all, it's funny that you mentioned George Kittle because I did have an interview with Brenton Strange over the summer, and he loves George Kittle,
It's in his game. You can see it.
right?
You can
Like
literally see it. Yeah.
loves it, wants to be that, knows that that's his path to the NFL is being an excellent uh, do both, right, tight end.
Yep.
So that's the first point. My thrust would simply be that if it's not Brenton Strange, it's probably Theo Johnson, and if
Yeah.
it's not Theo Johnson, then it's probably Tyler Warren. One of those guys, one
Yeah.
of those three, is going to just naturally ascend into that role, right? Like and again, like I'm not sure. I don't know with Clifford who the security blanket is best with. I don't
Yep.
know who has the best uh, proclivity for making tough catches, because I do think that's a huge part of it. Is
Yes.
you got to
Yep.
make some. You got to make some tough catches. You're going to be defended, but you're going to have mismatches, uh, just given that position, and likely lining up against a linebacker that's smaller than you, a safety that's smaller than you. But you got to catch the ball, and
Yep.
so what does that look like when you don't have a 10-yard halo around you? As we saw at times in some of those spring games. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who does that. But just given the buzz and the conversation that has happened really since the end of last season, there's a pretty good chance that exists in the room. It's just figuring out who it is.
Yeah, that's kind of where I landed as well. But just with the youth and the unknown, I've seen it. I've
Yeah,
seen it both ways, right? You've seen it where the guy then takes that next step, and I've seen it where the guy doesn't take that next step. And last year, what we saw were flashes at the end of the season. They weren't necessarily genuinely great plays. It was,
yeah,
if you look at the metrics of what they did, it was such a small sample size that it really, that's why I'm a little lower on that position. We are almost halfway through our confidence factor with Nate Bauer. We say we are going to go half an hour. We're 25 minutes in. We're doing a great job. We're getting there. But I do want to take a break quickly just to tell you about an awesome promotion, because if you want to get more from Blue White Illustrated, if you want to get the inside scoop, the fall camp special, promo code BWI60. Not enough people are taking advantage of this, because this is a great deal.
Do it.
2 months free. And right now, it is the 24th of August. You're going to be getting into September and deep into October if you use the promo code BWI60 to get 2 months free of Blue White Illustrated. Do it right now. Get yourself set up for the season. That's not just now. That's also hoops stuff. Yesterday, you and Dave Eckert broke down Penn State's biggest recruit of the year, the biggest recruit since Lamar Stevens and Tony Carr committing to Penn State. So there's all kinds of great information. If you want more on that, you can check out our YouTube page, Blue White Illustrated on YouTube, and of course, bwi.rivals.com/subscribe. Nate, I know you want to give this to the people. This was obviously your idea with BWI60. So thank you from the people.
It was, and honestly, they should stop the podcast because I will literally still be here.
Oh yeah,
I'll still be here.
Yeah.
Still talking. Still
speaking
waiting for you to tell me to shut up.
We all have areas. Sean Clifford has areas in his game that he needs to improve. I need to be a better commander of the offense. That's on me. We're going to do that, though. We're going to move on to offensive tackle. And here, Nate, I believe this is your highest level of confidence in any position group on the field. Tell us why you're so high on the offensive tackle group.
Rasheed Walker is a first-round pick. What else do you want? I don't see how. I mean, if he's a first-round pick, and I think he is, then that puts him in that echelon of not only the Big Ten's best, but the country's best.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, obviously he has to do it, but those are the expectations: is that he has the tools to be able to do that. And again, I'm so high on Phil Troutwine,
Yes.
and right, like. And so bought into the notion that last year was an abomination for that group at the beginning of the season, in particular, based on the challenges that they faced in the spring and the summer. To not have that hands-on instruction, I mean, I don't think it can be stated enough or overstated just how detrimental that was to that group's development. Give them an entire season, an entire winter workout, an entire spring, and a summer of normalcy. And I think that Rasheed Walker is going to be great. I think that group is going to be much improved. I don't know that they're great. I don't know that they're going to be like the Big Ten's best offensive line, but
Right.
I think they're going to be markedly improved from last season. And I think that the potential is there for a standout performance from Rasheed Walker, and not that far behind from Caden Wallace.
So I was going to say,
that,
talk to me about Caden Wallace, because to me, last season, I don't believe I have a good read on what Caden Wallace is, because the offense was so fundamentally basic last year when he was the starting right tackle. The end of last season, we didn't see him in what I think we're going to see this year from Mike Yurcich, which is way more in space, way more pass sets. He was, I don't want to say he was intentionally protected. He wasn't the guy that they were protecting, but he was a part of that protection that was simplified. You're very confident in Rasheed Walker. Are you as confident in Caden Wallace?
No.
Okay.
No, but we're doing some projecting here. I mean,
right.
Part of this is all right. Well, here's what's being said behind the scenes. Here's what the natural trajectory is of these guys' careers, and I think that they believe that the ceiling is maybe not as high as Rasheed Walker's, but I think that they think it's pretty good. I think that they think that there's a lot of potential there for Caden Wallace. And again, given that ability, that normal offseason, that instructional level, the developmental element of his game to have provided that at this time in his career, I think should pay dividends that Penn State will find to be very beneficial for him this season. I really do. I mean, I think that place of having two tackles that you have high confidence, if not extremely high confidence in, is a great place to start if you're Mike Yurcich, really.
Yeah, and I even said yesterday I think I'm openly lower than I should be on the tackle position because I lockstep with you on what I think Rasheed Walker can be, and I do think he's going to reach that this year. But I'm just kind of floating on the complete unknown of we saw flashes of it last year. Don't know that we're going to see it this year. We expect to, and then with Cade Wallace, I'm just completely unknown as to what his high end abilities are. Even though, like you said, we've heard great things. James Franklin, Phil Troutwine have talked in glowing terms about Caden Wallace. It's just to me like after game one, I might have a way different opinion of what that is. I have no evidence to go off of.
Put it this way: do you think that after any game this season, you're going to? And I think I might know the answer here, but do you think that you will be talking about Caden Wallace individually as a disaster,
I
as a liability for the offensive line?
The first time I watched Will Fries, I thought a relatively same thing that I do about Caden Wallace. So it's a sore spot for me that I thought Will Fries was going to be a great right tackle, and he became a good right tackle that was abused by elite pass rushers, and the Big Ten has elite pass rushers. So
Sure.
no, but I don't know if they're going to run at eight. What's Aiden Hutchinson going to do to these guys? And that's kind of my thought. Is like there's always a Bosa, or there's always a Chase Young, or there's always a Rashawn Gary out there. And do they compare to those guys? And that's really, to me, that's I thought Will Fries was going to be that guy. He turns out he's a very good guard, but I thought he had the foot speed to be a tackle. Now, this is where Phil Troutwine comes in and his ability to get the most out of those guys and to make them into that level of player to go along with their physical potential. And that is the interior of the offensive line. I think that's the biggest question on the offensive line. What is your confidence in that group?
Yeah, less than the tackles for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, the fact that they still need to figure out one of the guard spots, it seems like at this point they still need to figure that out. Um, yeah, I mean, there is definitely an element of who knows with the. I did get a pronunciation guide here. It's Anthony Wigan,
It
like
is. Thank
why
you.
it. Who knew? Who knew? So Anthony Vigan, Des Holmes, and Salim Wormley, right? Like,
Yep.
so one of those three guys, and I don't know. I really don't know what to anticipate. I know that Juice Scruggs comes in with a pretty high level of optimism in terms of what he's capable of doing and the play that he's going to be able to produce for them. And then at center, Mike Miranda, I think historically speaking, and this is really probably true throughout the offensive line, but you get seniors in there at center or multi-year guys in there at center, and they tend to do well.
Yeah.
They tend to serve as that steadying presence, which I think is pretty important at that position. So, are they going to be bulletproof? Probably not. But should they be able to hold their own enough through the season? Yeah, I think so. And so 72, I got 72, you got 65. I do think that element of unknown of, yes, the guard spot, but also how they'll play together is a part of that as well. Is right. Like this is a shakeup. This is not the same interior offensive line as
Right.
you had last year.
Right.
So what are they going to look like as a unit? I'm not exactly sure, and I think that if you ask Penn State, they might not be exactly sure, given the fact that it's still not a settled situation.
The best news is that at your center position, Mike Miranda has more career snaps than anyone on the team other than Rasheed Walker. So that's an important factor for that position, that you have at least that steady force on the interior. That it just that's the question. Is it are they going to be able to perform as a unit? I know we broke them out individually, but are they going to be able to perform as a unit? I think overall you should be confident in this group. So let's move on to the defensive side of the ball. We've wrapped up the offense, and let's look at what Nate's confidence is in the defense and the position outside of safety that I think there is the most intrigue at is where we're going to start, because I like to start up front. The defensive end position, how confident are you in those defensive ends?
That's a great question. I think Arnold Ebiketie is going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
I think he will make plays that at the end of the season, Penn State fans remember. Right. And that's a big part of that position is not only sacks or forced fumbles, hurries, what have you. It's the timing of them. And, I think that appears to be the type of player that he is capable of being and has been in the past, just at a different level. You got to see how it translates to the Big Ten. But
how big
I
of
think
that question, I don't mean to cut you off. That question
to
me is one that people keep saying to me, but he was so productive at that level, and just based on his physical build, long arms, super quick, the way he moves, I don't have any questions about that. But should I have questions about that? Because literally everyone else, when you talk about him, that's the second thing they bring up. The first is that he was a transfer.
I think it's a prerequisite to acknowledge, at least that he was a very good player at Temple, and that means one thing, right, against the competition that you're playing there. It's something to note. Is it the be all end all? No, I don't think so. And I think that there are plenty of players who probably develop at that level more. And you see it all the time. I mean, the NFL draft does not care what program you play in or what necessarily what level of competition you're playing against on a week out basis. It's what have you shown on film?
Right.
And so those guys get opportunities. Temple, it's not like Temple plays an exclusively conference schedule. They get out of conference games, and he's done that in the past. So I think that it lends itself to the element of, hey, maybe there's less certainty, like a smidge less certainty about how it will translate to the Big Ten, but generally speaking, the trajectory that this guy has shown and the potential that this guy has shown suggests that he's going to be pretty good at this level. But for the rest of the position, now you're not sure.
Yeah.
Now you're not real sure, right? What kind of a defensive end is Nick Tarburton? Because he has gotten plenty of buzz this off season for within the program, and I think you got to wonder about his health and how that's going to stay, right? And fairly or unfairly, some of these guys, it's not like it's their fault. They just, some guys have more of an issue than others. But that lends itself to some questions for him. And then behind those two guys, you're just not sure, right? I don't know what Smith Filbert is. Yeah. I think that we've seen flashes. We saw a little bit last year. I have no idea what Zariah Fisher is. I don't know what Jesse Luketa is as a defensive end. Those are some significant questions for that group to answer. I think that Penn State believes that there's potential within that group. It's just a matter of, hey, potential doesn't always translate.
Yep.
And that's something that you have to do. So I don't know. I mean, I think that you've been fairly high on potential, haven't you?
Sure, yeah, but at this position, the one guy we've talked about that has that high end potential is Smith Vilbert. Everybody else, to me, doesn't have the sort of game changing abilities that you've become accustomed to at the defensive end position, and we haven't been hearing a lot about Smith Vilbert. He has been a guy we've heard about. He's been the third name mentioned, but it's not like we've heard rave reviews of this guy that has been blowing up training camp. So to me, that's why I was so low on this group, is that they are going to be, I think, baseline defensive ends. My question is, are you going to be able to scheme for Ebiketie? as the offense, and then is anyone else going to be able to step up and create pressure, or is this going to be a year you have to manufacture it? And are they a part of the whole, or are they going to be something that can stand out on their own? You are a little more confident in that they're going to get acceptable play on the whole, it seems, from the defensive end position, not just as pass rushers, but as a full unit, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I want to know and haven't seen what does Penn State look like as a defense when Jaquan Brisker is a free blitzer? What does Penn State look like as a defense? I don't know where that pressure is going to necessarily come from if it doesn't come from the defensive ends, right? Is PJ Mustipher gonna blow up, the middle of the line to the point where he's getting pressure in the backfield, or is he just a run stuffer? Like,
right.
I don't know about that other tackle position. Like, I'm not sure exactly how that group is going to look. I think they have potential. I think that people see and have an optimism that they're going to be able to translate it to the field, but until they actually do it, you just don't know.
Yeah. Let's talk about that defensive tackle position, because obviously one bleeds right into the other with a couple of guys that have position versatility, but also they play right next to each other. They play off each other. So how confident are you in the defensive tackle position?
Yeah, so I've got a 74, you've got a 72. We agree. No, I do think that PJ Mustipher moving the nose is going to help him. I think that that's what they feel like he was last year and the year before. He just didn't have the opportunity to do that based on Penn State's other personnel, right? So now that he's positionally where he's supposed to be, and able to do the things that he does the best and is most comfortable doing, it opens up that potential for him to be at his best, but it also opens up that three technique spot for Hakeem Beamon or Derek Tangelo. One of those two guys are going to have an opportunity there to make some plays, and that's a position that in the past Penn State has utilized, right? The Kevin Givens, right? Like there are plays to be made out of that spot.
Yep.
And so, if PJ is commanding the attention that you would think he would get, then there are going to be some opportunities there for those other guys. But like I said, I mean, it's just about not necessarily the stars being stars. I'm using stars liberally here.
Yeah.
PJ Mustipher, right?
That's a good point. Take a step back for a second. You're like, nose tackle star. Right. Yeah.
Just household names when the only thing that you cover is Penn State football.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Stars.
Yeah.
So it's not Ebiketie and Mustipher, it's Beamon and Tarburn, right? Like,
right.
Can the guys who you're not scheming against make you pay for that?
Right.
And I don't know. I think the potential is there. I think that you like the fact that your options are older at those positions. The second end and the second tackle. But you gotta put it on the field. So
and high floor players, I think, is again what you've talked about before, is consistency. Where at this defensive tackle position, I think the reason we feel this way is because we can expect what we're going to get from even Tangelo as a fifth-year transfer and from Mustipher as a guy who's in his fourth year and is back at his natural position. Maybe not, as you referenced, not actual stars, but guys that you can feel confident are rock-steady players. You know what you're going to get, and you're going to get dependable play from them. And that is really then the question is, where's my favorite thing? Where's the upside? And do you have any of that? At the defensive end position, it's a total wild card. it's a little bit clearer as to who the guys might be at that defensive tackle position, and then it's just about, can they do it?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's there's no question that if you look across the field, the defensive line as a whole is probably, if not the biggest question, one of the bigger questions that the team has to answer going into the season.
Speaking of guys that could actually be superstars, guys that could make big plays and get national recognition and be the difference makers that everyone sees on TV, let's talk about the linebackers and your confidence that that's all going to work. Is it all going to work? How confident are you in that?
Oh, I don't know. I have a 74 against your 68. So obviously
that's I went back and forth on this one. I'll get to that in a minute. That's what you're seeing is in the last video I updated that, just so you know.
Okay. What was the prior number?
So that is the prior, the one you're looking at on our document. That's the prior number. I'm banking on the talent here, so I went with a 79, I think 78.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's a little swing there.
It's a big swing.
Yeah. No, I look. Again, Ellis Brooks, I would have some questions about. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Brandon Smith, I think, again, that I give a lot of credence to the notion of, one, the problems that Penn State's defense had last year as being a product of players being out of position.
Yeah.
I think that was a big factor. And so part of my perspective about this season for the defense is shaped by the notion that they won't be in that same spot. They don't have to make those same adjustments. Brent Pry can play his best players at their best positions.
Yep.
Positionally based on the personnel that they have.
Even going back to Mustafa, even going back to the guys that we thought were good football players playing out of position that played reasonably well, but guys that it's not even guys that play bad, it's guys that play to a good level. They're going to be in a better position this year.
Correct. And so Brandon Smith, with that move, all right, now he is able to do what he does best.
Yeah.
Right. Mike, I'm not sure. Jacobs, I'm not sure. I think, again, like potential. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we are judging this based on their reputation for sure. What's being said about them this offseason. And to me, at least, even having these conversations with these guys through summer interviews and preseason interviews and so on and so forth, they're exhibiting and exuding a confidence that maybe you didn't see a year ago.
Yeah. Because they got to practice. I don't want to keep going back to that, but you're going to be more confident if you've tried it a couple times and you've seen something.
I mean, I'm sure that I'm sure some people are listening to me right now saying, yeah, no, duh, like they haven't played a game. Of course you're going to be confident. You feel good about yourself in the off season when you haven't had, the opportunity to get punched in the mouth a little bit.
Yeah.
But I do think that those changes will lead to more success for Penn State as a whole this season. And I think linebacker is one of those positions where, one, that matters.
Yeah.
Two, I don't know how much they're going to have three linebackers on the field.
Right.
So you kind of need two guys there who are consistent. Or you need to feel you just need to feel comfortable with the top end of who you have and the top end of who they have now. I think they feel reasonably comfortable with.
Yeah. So you kind of hit the nail on the head of what I was waffling back and forth with and why I started out high. Then I thought about it, and I thought about last year and Brandon Smith being in that position and Curtis Jacobs being a player who's playing for the first time, like a starter for the first time. And then I got to that confidence of there. But the more I think about, and this is really Curtis Jacobs. First off, I think these two outside backers from the Will and the Sam, with Brandon Smith and Curtis Jacobs, have superstar potential. And
Yep.
being in the right spot, you can get better production out of Brandon Smith. What I saw from Curtis Jacobs, again, in scrimmages, in limited things last year on the field, predatory movement skills. Like a confident, attacking, dangerous football player that can make plays at every level of the field. That is what I think his ceiling is. And I'm going off of just literally a feeling of watching him play. He reminds me of great football players, the way he conducts himself. So I'm banking on the high end here is where I ended up where I did, of trusting my instinct of looking at that. But you're right. What we saw last year, you can't completely ignore it. And the situation at that middle linebacker position, at the Mike linebacker, it really kind of gives you pause. But if you can just get steady, from there, I think it's a position that has a very specific skill and a very specific role on the defense. And if you can get that from them and let everyone else go to work around it, it's one that you can easily expose, but I think that you can hide with good talent. And that's where I understand why you landed where you did, because I was going back and forth like a yo-yo with this position all of yesterday.
Jan Johnson had a very successful Penn State football career.
Yep.
And was beloved.
Yep.
Within the Penn State football program. That's not taking anything away from him as a football player to acknowledge, like, he's not the most athletic guy in the world.
Right.
He was a walk-on, right? Who wrestled. But do you know where you're supposed to be and when you're supposed to be there?
Yep.
Because this defense, and if you're a guy who can make the play when presented with that opportunity, Penn State as a defense will funnel the tackles to you. Mm-hmm. Right? Like that's how the defense works.
Yeah.
Right. So, if Penn State has that in Ellis Brooks and or Lucetta, right, and or Tyler Elston.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
You can see it right now, right? Like I saw pictures of him from preseason photo day a couple of days ago, and I've seen him on practice a couple of times. Like, that's a name that you're going to know before the end of his career. He's a guy who people are going to be talking about. Elston. It's the writing is on the wall that is where he is going. I don't know if he's ready for that this season, or if Penn State necessarily has the need for that this season. I mean, he might make it impossible to ignore, right? I'm not sure, but that's just what Penn State is going to have to figure out this preseason, and then once you get into the season and kind of go from there. But yeah, there are options. It's just a matter of who is going to be the most consistent there, and take advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, and I've been a fan of Elston's potential. Again, going to that upside for a bit now. And the fact that he's another guy that flashed to me a little bit in preseason, but without really seeing even live stuff during training camp, you don't know where that's gone. And if he is able to be a part of that conversation, as you pointed out, a name you need to keep in the back of your mind is Tyler Elston, at least at some point this season, because I do think he's going to see the field at some point, even if it's in a Villanova or if it's in a Ball State sort of game. Let's take a quick break here, and let's talk about more things you need to know, like the fact that the latest edition of the Blue White Illustrated magazine is out right now. It is around town, wherever you get your magazines at newsstands. He's got one right there. We got a picture of the cover up. It's all there for you. This is our training camp preview. It's got exclusive interviews. It's got some deep insights. And, of course, it's got some recruiting stuff after a wild July with all kinds of information on some of Penn State's best prospects in a class that was ranked number one in the nation for at least 3 weeks before Notre Dame got another recruit. And then you know how points and systems and math work. But a very good recruiting class for Penn State football.
Very good. And honestly, somebody wrote a tremendous cover story about Sean Clifford. I don't know who.
I was flipping through it. I was
the most insight, just deep
I was transported.
Psychoanalysis.
I was
Yeah.
transported to an early dewy morning on the golf course. And
Oh, wow.
I felt the words and I felt the early morning sun that
Yeah, you were
one
there.
Nate Bauer was describing. So if you want that beautiful prose, you can pick that up wherever you get your magazines around town in State College or bluewhiteonline.com. And you can make sure you can go to bwi.rivals.com/subscribe so you get a daily dose of his beautiful writing. That is Nate Bauer, Blue White
Y-
Illustrated senior editor.
You and I know that football fans are here for the pros.
Well, I don't think that they're here for the poetry. I don't think they want you to write in sonnets, but I appreciate a good transportation to a different time and place. I like to feel it. You really get a sense of
Yeah, I'm taking you to the English countryside next. That's
it. What
gonna
period?
be
Are we
great.
going 1800s? Are we going medieval?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. The onset, the earliest stages of what football would eventually become. The Gaelic games.
Oh, wonderful. That speaks to my heritage.
You're
Let's
gonna have to cut all of this.
This is the good stuff. This is the good stuff. Let's move on to some good stuff at a different position, and I think one that for Penn State football fans, we've talked a lot about the corners. So how confident are you that we're going to see what we've heard from Penn State football about its cornerback position?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'm pretty confident. Pretty confident, right? I have 78. You have 81. 78 is just shy of all Big Ten. I mean, I think Tariq Castro Fields has a very good opportunity if he stays healthy to be that player.
Yeah.
I think that Joey Porter Jr. has a very good opportunity to be that player. I think maybe Kalen King has an opportunity to be that player, right?
Yeah. It's been a couple
Look,
weeks
like,
since we mentioned his name. It's good that you worked him in because we
yeah,
haven't heard or talked much about Kalen King, but he was the story of the early part of this year for Penn State football.
I think that we're going to be talking about him quite a bit in a couple of
Yeah.
in a couple of weeks, honestly, to the point that we might be surprised by who's not on the field sometimes, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
there's just it's kind of that age-old question of players who have established themselves and have played well, and you think to yourself, hey, they have to be on the field. Yeah, they do have to be on the field, but sometimes the freshman is just so good. It's rare, but they're just so good that you can't keep them off the field. And so
Yeah.
you've got to find an opportunity for them to be out there and to make plays. So yeah,
So
I mean, I was just gonna say, like, I think that King's playmaking ability, they just the way that I see Penn State defensively operating, the things that they put priorities on, is that it's not. Yes, you want to keep everything in front of you. You like they've been begging for game-changing plays
Yep.
for the last 2 or 3 years
Yep.
and haven't had it. They haven't had it
Yeah.
in some respects. And so if you have a piece like this that you can plug in and has a knack for making those types of plays, yeah, man, I think that that's going to be too tempting for them to keep off the field.
Nate is saying that there's definitely a great chance that one of these guys is going to be an all Big Ten player. I think it's a lock because they have four really good players. Guy you didn't mention is Johnny Dixon. I think is super talented. But when you talk about the instinct part, that's something I talked about on a previous edition of the BWI Daily Edition of where it is and where it comes from. So if you want to check that out, that was a really interesting insight because I asked the guys directly. Coach Poindexter, we asked Jaquan Brisker, Jair Brown, what are instincts and where do they come from? Because you're right, it's something that Penn State has needed, and it seems like they're bringing that guy in with Kalen King into this unit. With that depth, do you see, and we'll get to the slot in a little bit, we're just talking about the boundary corner, do you see guys being on the field enough to get to that all Big Ten level? Because you've got four guys that can go in and possibly be interchangeable.
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, and this is probably the wrong time to bring this up and won't make anybody happen, but you always lose players.
True.
You're not
Yep.
going to have everybody that we think is going to be available right now in the preseason. You're looking at 120 man roster. They're not all going to be there. That's just one of the
Yeah.
realities.
Yep.
Is injuries, what have you? Uh, it never stays that way. So to the point that last year Brent Pry brought up the fact that at one game, I think it was Rutgers, they were playing with 2.5 corners. I know we talked about this before, but they don't have. It doesn't always stay that way. So yes, can somebody do that and be on the field enough to have an All Big Ten season out of that corner group? Yeah. Not only that, but there's just because you have really talented depth doesn't mean that you can't have a starter who is very clearly separated himself.
Right. Yeah.
And and again, like that's one of those things that you're not going to know it necessarily in the preseason, but as the year goes on, right, put it this way, if nobody has separated themselves to the point where they have to play all 4 corners or 5 corners, then I don't think that there will be an All Big Ten corner
Right.
because somebody will have not demonstrated and separated themselves to the point where they get that kind of
Yeah.
recognition and produce
That
that kind of play.
they're playing to that level that they demand the snaps, they demand the playing time, and you have to adjust accordingly. One guy that I think
Correct.
we both agree will be that is Jaquan Brisker, and is poised
Yep.
for what I think is a potential All-American season. My
Yep.
confidence in that position is high. Where do you land at the safety position?
Yeah. Very high, very high. Because again, Brisker's move to strong, and what I see as potential for that free spot, right, to the field. They just having the right characteristics out of Jair and Keaton Ellis gives you the potential for a center fielder who, again, can keep everything in front of them and make plays,
Yeah.
right? And those 2 guys seem to have that ability. Again, I'm harping on the turnovers, but it's a big deal. It's a
Yeah.
big deal. It doesn't mean that it frees you up to get burnt, right? All the time. I mean, if they have to make a decision between guy one can make a ton of plays but gets burnt all the time, guy two never gets burnt but doesn't make a ton of plays, they're going to take guy two,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
That's how
and
that's
and
going to
lean
work.
on other players to then make those plays. You do have to have that, as you said, strike that balance of make plays but not get beat deep. That is when it comes to the secondary, it is very much like the offensive line of if you've got one weak link, it can cause a lot of problems. That 9 guys are playing great, if 2 aren't on the defense, you can have a problem, especially if one of those guys is in the secondary. Do you think they're going to be able to get to that threshold with those guys at that position? With Keaton Ellis, Jair Brown, possibly Tyler Rudolph, of
Yep.
somebody who's going to give you that floor of just being a dependable part of the secondary to round out the talent at the other positions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both. I think the floor has risen, but I
Yeah.
also think the ceiling has risen. The
Yes.
ceiling is completely changed in that Jaquan Brisker didn't want to be what he was being last season. He didn't want to be that, but he had to be based on where Lamont Wade needed to be on the field. So give Jaquan Brisker. I mean, put it this way: you're not going to be surprised when Brandon Smith and Jaquan Brisker are around the ball constantly this
Yeah.
season, right? Like I expect to hear that quite a bit when they're in the press box calling out who made the tackle. I'm gonna hear both of those names quite a bit this season, and so yeah, I think the numbers are going to be there, and for that other spot opposite Brisker, I think that if they can make the interception, if they can catch the ball when the opportunity comes, that's a potentially game-changing position group that Penn State has on the field this season.
Yep. Yep. I agree. I think that's the consensus about that safety position, and it just becomes that free safety position, who wins this battle, and what is it that becomes of that other position to either set the floor or the ceiling for the safety group as a whole. Let's move on to my favorite position to talk about, and that's the slot position. And I'm throwing just slot defender. I don't say just cornerback. I don't say just whoever it is that lines up in the slot, the bodies they have to throw at that position. How confident are you in the slot defender position for Penn State?
I think that they're going to – I don't know what I don't know who it's going to be. Daquan Hardy seems to have a little bit of buzz right now to fulfill that role. But you could see Keaton Ellis there. You could see I don't know, Marquise Wilson there. You could see any number of players fill that role. And because of that, the more options that you have, the more comfortable you can feel, again, that your top choice is going to be fairly reliable. Right. And that, to me, is a huge piece of how that's going to come out, is who can you depend on there? Who is the guy that's going to make plays and be consistent and make tackles? So yeah, I think that the fact that they have so many bodies, right? And like good
different types too, different. Yep.
Right. But like you just have so much to work with there that I think it's this is stupid. I hate it already that I'm going to say this, but the Top Chef, where you get 3 ingredients, whatever, right?
Yeah.
You gotta make something out of Cheetos that you got in the vending machine.
Yep. And a pig's tail.
Yeah. This is not that. This is a cupboard, pantry, refrigerator full of ingredients, all of which Brent Pry is going to be relied upon to be the chef and concoct something that is palatable to the program and fans. But I think that the options are there.
I agree, and I consider in that too Curtis Jacobs. I know I'm kind of double dipping with him at linebacker, but I consider him a part of that slot conversation. Can you play base defense? And I think you can play base defense until you don't want to. When they were at their best in 2019, Cam Brown was a very good Sam linebacker who was dependable at multiple levels of the field. They need to find that again, and I think that they're on the right track there. But even without that, and with all due respect, I thought he was a very good underneath defender. I thought he's a very zone corner. I think he's going to have a chance to stick with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but when you put him in man coverage situations, Lamont Wade struggled to cover down the field. You have a variety of bodies that can do that now, and you don't have to put people in positions where their strengths aren't aligned with what they're being asked to do. So I agree. I think that in general, they've got the right mix of players in that position to execute whatever they want, as long as the defensive line does not hang them all up to dry. That, I think, is the biggest question when it comes to the secondary is, are they going to be out there for 6 seconds on every play?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, nothing to add. If they don't get a pass rush, then that becomes problematic. Very problematic. And so, I mean, look, it's fun to I'm looking at our spreadsheet here, and I see these individual positions, right? And in my mind, it's like individual players. James Franklin, he says it for a reason. It's the ultimate team sport. None of these guys operate completely on an island. And if the complementary pieces are not performing to the level that they need, then it inhibits the production and success of everyone else around them. And that's a huge part, especially on the defensive side of the ball, of how they're going to perform this year.
We're in the final week of training camp. Game week is next week with Penn State, Wisconsin, so stay here. We've got a bunch of great stuff on the BWI Daily Edition coming up this week as we get more insight into the final week of training camp. Some questions might be answered in the coming days. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts so you get the information first. You get the in-depth analysis from myself, from Nate Bauer, from Dave Eckert, from Greg Pickle, as we're all live at training camp. When we're given that access, we give all the information we get to you, but you've got to be there to get it. bwi.rivals.com/subscribe. And again, YouTube, Blue White Illustrated on YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Nate Bauer, senior editor, here with me on the Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. Nate, thanks again. We'll be talking again soon, I believe.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I can't believe we're not going to talk about kicker, punter.
I got that note from somebody.
Manager.
Listen, I only can go so far. I only can go so far, and I'm just not going to give you my confidence factor in the punter and the kicker. It's fine. How about that? It's fine.
Yeah, they're fine.
We'll talk to you again tomorrow on the BWI Daily Edition.